Is that the democracy that we're defending now?
No, and you're correct to point out the hypocrisy of the left, especially on some of the other networks. I watch those networks too. I get counterpoints. I watch conservative media. I watch the other mainstream networks, and they're not calling out things appropriately. You are correct that President Trump has been tougher on Russia than any other post-war president, post-Cold War president. That is correct. I fact-checked that with NPR because that's a trusted source. But I don't see that coming. I don't see that. I don't see that coming from mainstream media, other mainstream media.
Again, a 30,000-foot question here. So we've been tougher on Russia. We're also closer to war with Russia than we've been at any time, probably since the Cuban Missile Crisis. How are we safer for that? Does that make you feel safer? It doesn't make me feel safer.
As far as protecting our democracy and protecting against cyber warfare, it's a real problem in this day and age. And we saw all of those intelligence agencies, the U.S. intelligence agencies, come out clearly and say that this was a problem. This actually did happen. President Trump has kind of been waffling on whether or not he believes U.S. intelligence, but you know, it's a problem, and we are better for looking into this because it protects our democracy, which again I say is a nonpartisan issue.
Yeah,
as Patriots,
I feel it's been
we should all
but
want to protect our democracy.
Robin, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tucker.
Elizabeth Price Foley is a professor at Florida International University College of Law. She thinks about these questions a lot, and she joins us tonight. Professor, thank you very much for coming on. So I don't think it's an arcane or irrelevant question. Who is Robert Mueller's boss? I keep hearing that Trump can't have anything to do with Robert Mueller, neither can DOJ. That doesn't sound democratic to me at all.
Yeah, he's kind of a strange constitutional chimera, if you will. I don't know who his boss is. In theory, he's an employee or an officer, more specifically, within the Department of Justice, and he would be accountable to the Attorney General, who is in turn accountable to the President. However, what they've done is they've disabled that accountability by not only obtaining Jeff Sessions' recusal, but by now suggesting that the acting Attorney General, Mr. Whitaker, can't exercise supervision because if he does, it'll be shutting down a legitimate investigation and obstruction of justice. And if the AG can't fire Mueller, then presumably the president can't either without facing the same headwind of political criticism that might be fatal to his presidency. So they've managed somehow to completely disable one of the president's key constitutional powers, which is the power to fire his subordinates. So
what you're telling me is a howling pack of cable news morons brayed until the administration got bullied into placing a guy who'd been elected by nobody into the position of ultimate power. He's not accountable to any elected official, and this is the democracy that we're supposed to be defending?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And they did it, and they did it on purpose. And I think one day they're going to come to regret it because if you can do this to President Trump, you can do it to, frankly, any incoming future president.
But there's nothing, I mean, I guess just to the point, I mean, leaving Trump or future presidents or any politician out of it, there's nothing that voters can do because they are wholly powerless over Robert Mueller. So isn't that like the opposite of the system that we're supposed to be living under?
Yeah, I mean, you know, he's kind of a fourth branch of government unto himself because, you know, he has actual what's called entrenchment via regulation, which means he can't be fired except for, quote unquote, good cause. And so you'd have to lay the foundation to even try to begin to fire him, which is not easy to do. It's kind of the functional equivalent of having tenure as a professor. It's very difficult to get rid of him. And if you do dare to try to fire him, if Trump did it or if Whitaker or a future attorney general tried to do it, you could be sure that there would be investigation after investigation after investigation and cries of obstruction of justice. So there'd be a very high political price to pay.
So he's just a heavily armed pope, and we just have to kind of live with it. Okay, even as we defend democracy. Professor, thank you for claiming, you know, I'm not a lawyer, so I just appreciated the clarity on that. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, the former FBI director, Jim Comey, is scheduled to testify tomorrow to the House Judiciary Committee. Why is he going there? What questions should House members ask him? It's easy to lose track of all these different threads. That's why we're grateful to have Terry Turchie with us. He's a former Deputy FBI Assistant Director of Counterterrorism, and he's with us right now. Mr. Turchie, thanks very much for coming on. So
You're welcome, Tucker.
What should members of the committee in the House ask of Mr. Comey tomorrow?
Well, I think, first of all, Tucker, I'd like to say that we should all keep in mind that when you take the Clinton email server investigation and the Russian collusion investigation, much of this wasn't done in accordance with the way the FBI usually does business. So that's your first clue that something is wrong, and something was wrong with the decision-making process inside the FBI. So what I would do, because these people on the committee have had access to millions of records and done a lot of interviews over the last couple of years, they have a lot of information. So what I would try to do here, because I think the key here is to find out from Jim Comey if he ever thought there was political interference in what he was doing in the FBI and the decisions he was making. And if he did, who were the people behind that? Because after all the questions that have been asked, and even these questions have been asked, we still don't have simple answers to simple questions. Let me take one, for example. I'd like to see them ask him this. Who made the decision not to use a grand jury in the Clinton email server investigation? Yes. That would have saved us a lot of trouble right now, because we would have had a neutral party, and the FBI, the Department of Justice, all these personalities would have been out of this. But that didn't happen. Why did that not happen? Jim Comey should know the answer to that. He should know who decided not to use a grand jury. The other thing, or another simple question is, I'd like to go to the interview of Hillary Clinton. And then we know that he was already working on the memo to exonerate her even before she was interviewed. So I think they should really hone in on all of the questions related to the planning of that interview. And when we're FBI agents and we're trained to do interviews in our car, and I mean, when we get to the street, the normal FBI case, you know, you plan a lot of these interviews in the back of your car. You're talking to each other. You put somebody in the front seat. And you plan it, though. You know going into it what to expect, what you're going to try to get out of it, and kind of have an idea of what you're probably going to be told by the subject. But you are independently in control of all of that, the atmospherics, the atmosphere, everything. So in the Clinton case, that's not what happened. In the Clinton case, logistically, all kinds of people were involved in making decisions that made that interview just about useless. And so we need to know why was that, and who was calling those shots, and who in the DOJ was doing that. And I'll give you a real quick example. Why was Cheryl Mills, who was the chief of staff for Hillary Clinton at the State Department, and part of the problem here, why was she allowed to be there representing Hillary Clinton as one of her attorneys? These are really problematic. Really problematic.
2 years later, we still don't know. Terry Churchy, thanks very much for that. Really interesting.
You're very welcome.
We've got a Fox News alert for you. Multiple sources are telling Fox News tonight that the president plans to nominate Heather Nauert to replace Nikki Haley as ambassador to the United Nations. Nauert previously, of course, worked right here at Fox. She currently serves as the spokeswoman at the State Department. For the record, like her a lot. We'll continue to follow the story. Well, the left has united around the idea of admitting as many people as they can into America. But could that imperative clash with the left's traditional concern about the environment? Not a small question, really. That's next.
Tucker Carlson is brought to you by Pacific Life, protecting generations of families for 150 years.